The World Championships are over, and I'm going to talk about them. Hello, guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. On today's episode, we are talking about World Championships and everything that happened within them. If you didn't watch them, honestly, it was pretty good, except for the TCG. Don't watch the TCG. It was really, really bad. But all of the other events, I think, went really well. Rush Duel was the first time that they actually had a World Championship, and honestly, I was surprised by how good it was, because honestly, I'm not a big fan of Rush Duel, and I enjoyed myself. I thought it was a great finals, and overall, the event was a bit small, but still quite enjoyable. Duel Links had, obviously, speed duels in there as well, and again, quite surprising. Again, the finals, pretty interesting, but overall, wasn't my favorite. I really, really don't enjoy Duel Links, but the finals were good. Again, as someone who doesn't enjoy it, I still enjoyed watching finals, and overall, again, a bit small for the World Championship, but it was still quite enjoyable. As far as the TCG goes, we'll talk about that later, but it was painful. Okay, but obviously, Master Duel was quite different, and that is. Well, you can see Team 7 ended up winning. Yep, the runners-up actually took home the crown. So if you voted for Team 7, hey, congratulations to you. You get some rewards eventually. I don't know when they're going to show up, but eventually. So if you ended up choosing any of those teams, also, notably, if you chose Snipe Hunter, the previous title candidate, or title holders, right, they came in second, so you probably get stuff as well. Also, just everyone, if you voted at all, gets rewards, right? The top 12, which I believe... No, actually, there's 16 teams, isn't there? So technically not everyone. But pretty much everyone is going to get some sort of rewards, depending on what team they chose. You're going to get something, just in general. And a lucky 250 of you are likely to get... Well, will get 2,000 gems. So, coolio. Just for participating. Hooray, congratulations. However, I do want to talk about the series in general, and the format in general. This is the second year that Konami has done this weird teams format. If you want to check out the rules, they're here. And the first year this happened, I honestly wasn't too big of a fan of it. I thought it was kind of weird because, you know, coming from a TCG or just like basically every other tournament style, I was like, oh, this just kind of feels weird. It feels like, oh, it's not about like the skill of playing the game, and it's more of like this weird gimmick with like shared cards and only being able to have like having multiple decks, but also not like a side deck, and it being best of 3, but it's in like the team 3v3 style format and stuff like that. But this being the second year that this is run, Master Duel has been so much better than the TCG in terms of a viewer experience. That may also be just from me enjoying Master Duel a bit more, but also just from the skills that it specifically tests, right? Which let me actually show you the lists, right, now that they're all public, and explain to you why I have enjoyed it so much. Alright, so here we are on MasterDuelMeta.com, and real quick, I do need to talk about the fact that MasterDuelMeta.com, or Decade and his team, did post the team's deck lists while the event was still going, before the deck lists were public. And there was a bit of controversy about that. I think basically everyone overreacted. But I will say, shame on you, Decade, and your team for doing that. There was no reason to do that. It just didn't... You know, I understand you want to cover things as quickly as possible, and you want to get the information out to the public as quickly as possible and as cleanly as possible, and I do appreciate that. Most of the time it is very, very useful, but this was the one time where it did matter, and to be fair, I think the competitors all had access to this information as well, and could have definitely done this themselves if they really wanted to, and found out all of those deck lists that Decade and his team made public. But as of as of when the tournament's going, I think it's not really something that they should be doing. Just wait for the tournament to be over, and then you can post them, right? That was my biggest issue with it, was that it was happening while the event was still ongoing. Specifically in day one, because I think during day two they made the I know the two finalists or the two finalist teams had their profiles shown. I don't know what else, right? And I'm not sure where the exact information was taken, but yeah, we do know all of the profiles, at least for the finalists. So there's that. Anyway, that's all. Let's move on. Now, one of the things that I wanted to mention is how much I do enjoy this format, and a lot of it comes down to the fact that you now have to build... First of all, instead of just building one deck for a tournament, you're building two, right? But then, because you're playing a team event, you're actually building 6 altogether, right? Which I think is way more interesting and way more dynamic. And then on top of that, you also get a lot of very interesting choices to counter specific matchups, right? So you'll see that in a second. But overall, I thought it was... I just really, really enjoy this format, and I think it provides a lot more interesting games and a lot more interesting dynamics, right? Last year, we saw Exosister doing really, really well because of how dominant tier was, and everyone had a tier player who basically only ever played a tier, and so you could basically guarantee that you were getting that good matchup. And Joshua Schmidt even talked about this after the last Worlds, and yeah, you can kind of see that here as well when... basically every team is playing Fire King Snake Eye. Fire King Snake Eye kind of didn't do very well because everyone was so teched out to beat it and had a deck more or less specifically to counter Fire King Snake Eye. Now, with that being said, it still did really, really well, but a lot of people were prepared for it, so it didn't do as well as we expected it to. The other thing that I find interesting is that because of the shared cards, you're not able to just like play a whole bunch of staples in every single deck. You do have to choose what staples go into what deck, and I think that makes it a lot more interesting, and does change the deck choices, which you'll see more specifically with the Snipe Hunter lists. So starting out here, we have the Fire King Snake Eye and Vanquish Soul. Vanquish Soul didn't do well. Don't look at that. Don't look at that. That was just that was bad. But yeah, Ryan definitely piloted the Fire King Snake Eye really, really well. I would have liked to have seen Labyrinth here instead of the Vanquish Soul. One, because Ryan's really, really good at Lab, and two, I think it's just like a really solid deck to have in your arsenal for just for like forcing players to respect it. So there's that. But all in all, the Fire King Snake Eye deck was really, really well, and we'll see a bunch of those. Next up, we have Jesse Cotton's insane tier limit list. I am going to do a video breaking this down, but with that being said, I do have to point out, don't play these decks. Don't copy them card for card. They don't really work, and don't try and like, you know, play these specific lists with like minor changes, because it's just not going to work out. Just find a list for like a regular tournament or for regular Master Duel ladder, because most of these are going to be way different and just work very differently, because they are designed for a specific metagame, right, that they were more so expecting, and the Master Duel ladder is very different. That's all. But Jesse Cotton's tier limit list here was wild and was beautiful, and I could talk about it for days and how really, really cool it was. Also, it's a 60 card list, and some of the games were just the quintessential 60 card Master Duel hand, and some of them were normal summon Mudora pass, which was so funny. In the finals, normal summon Mudora pass. Let's go. It was very, very funny. Salomon Great never got played, and this was fine. It was a fine list. Oh, I do want to talk about real quick, the reason this list in particular I think was so good was due to the fact that it didn't take any of the staples away from any of the other lists, while still being able to break boards efficiently, because Tier Limit's super good at like playing through interactions, and it's why both Tier Limit and Branded had so much representation in the in this tournament, because of the fact that you can basically play them with just their engines and not really take up a whole bunch of staple cards that other lists may want to play, right? For example, things like Imperm or, you know, Triple Tack, right? Sure, triple attack is good, and you can see the triple attack, the third triple attack here in the tier element list, but you don't have to play it, and I think that really is one of the reasons why it was so good. And then we have a Ubel and Pearly list from Ray, and honestly, both of these were great choices as well. I think Pearly was highly underrepresented and did really, really well. So there we go. And again, bunch of staples here, but this time with board breakers that, again, work very similarly to hand traps in Pearly, where it's like, cool, going first, you're going to discard them for the Pearly combo, and going second, you are going to utilize them to either break the board or slow the opponent down with the hand traps. So all in all, it still worked really, really well, and Ray drew insanely godlike on day 2. It was crazy. So there's that. But yeah, all in all, very, very solid lineup here. Only confusion is Salamangreat and actually Vanquish Soul as well, but for the most part, they never really played those decks, so it didn't really matter. Moving on to Snipe Hunter, and you can see here they chose instead Infip, which does change what decks they chose to play, right? So you will see less combo-centric strategies and more strategies that kind of play into Maxi a little bit better because they're not playing Called By instead, or as their third card, right? As we can see, still playing the Fire King Snake Eye, which is playing the Called By, but then they also chose Lab, and very trap-heavy Lab. This was specifically teched out to be Phantom of Ubel, and you can kind of see with Black Horn of Heaven comedy. But yeah, overall, still very good, and this deck dominated the Ubels, and yeah, there's that. Then we have Emery, which was kind of cooking a little too hard, I'm not gonna lie, but still absolutely dominated day 1. It was just day 2 where I think things kind of fell apart. But Flu and Centurion, this Flunder list was specifically designed to be Fire King Snake Eye, which is why, like, Swallow's Cowrie is in here with a whole bunch of steal effects. It's like, cool, I'm going to steal your Garunix, or I'm going to steal your Ponix, and then use it with Swallow's Cowrie to get my combo started, which was really, really cool. So there's that. And then Centurion, which was pretty good, mostly due to the Bestials. I think the Bestials really heavily overperformed here, and so there's that. Yeah, all in all, though, pretty cool. And then, of course, we have Quantal on Tier and Voiceless Voice. Pretty standard. Nothing really too big of note here. Like, this is a very, very stock standard tier element list. He just played better than most of the other tier players. And then, of course, same thing with Voiceless Voice. Nothing really too big of a note. Except, I guess, for the books, which are kind of funny, but they're there. Then we have the Korean team from the October Duelist Cup, which, again, I thought this team was really good. And, hey, they made the top 4. They did really, really well. But we do have Greed with Fire King Snake Eye and Tier Limit. Again, not really too much of note with either of these lists. We have Suba with Branded and Ubel. Ubel using the Italy lock, and Branded, I believe, isn't actually using any sort of lock here, but it's just Branded, you know, with a bunch of board breakers. It's kind of funny. And then we have this Super Heavy Samurai Centurion list, which I think was honestly a great choice. I wasn't too big of a fan of the other Centurion list, but this one in particular I think was really, really nice, mostly due to the fact that with the Super Heavy Samurai stuff, you're able to kind of combo off even more, and more so make your end board in particular a lot more difficult to deal with. And I think that mattered a lot more, and I think this deck, I don't know if it necessarily performed better, but I think overall it had a better chance in this specific metagame. So it was very cool, and honestly, just a solid list. Really, really cool. Ignore the Runic Stun. It did terrible. It did so bad. Then we have Teen Heroes Futures list, which again, choosing the Called By, I believe we also chose Called By here. Not really too interesting, or too much of note there. But I think these guys had the best decks across the board. Jesse Cotton's list was super, super good because it was both meta and anti-meta in one deck, which made it really strong. But all of these lists were just solid across the board, and had their gimmicks that made them, that kind of pushed them above a lot of the other decks. But overall, was just so solid and so done, or so well done, just for like all of the decks, right? We have this 47 card tier element list, which was quintessential tier, just random numbers thrown in there. Of course playing grass, because why not? But yeah, very, very silly, and but it works really, really well. And yeah, I don't really have much to say about it. Vsauce Starfrost. There you go. Then this Voiceless Voice list playing the Albaz and the Jowgin for the Albion lock, which came up a ton. You know, you just link off 2 into the Verte Anaconda, and then you go for the Branded Fusion into Albaz and Jaugen, and then you just win the game. It was kind of nasty. It really sealed up a bunch of games that could have potentially been interesting. Yeah, there's that. Then we have the just Fire King Snake Eye player. Cool. Not much to note there. And then we also have the Duel and Labyrinth. And again, this is where I think all of these lists were really solid, right? The Ibly Lock allowing you to just kind of seal games. I saw even the Ibly Lock come out on like turn 4 or 5 or something like that, just to kind of solidify the game and make sure nothing was happening there. And it really did matter, right? Which is very nice. And then, of course, we have the Labyrinth list. Again, kind of teched out to specifically beat Ubel, because the Ubel mirror match is a nightmare, so why would you ever do that instead of playing the Labyrinth? And then there's one other team that I want to talk about real quick, but we will, you know, go through and show some of the other lists. And again, this is why I think this format's really cool. Just being able to see all of these different lists and all of these different strategies and how they, all of these different players are playing them, and kind of like the deck choices, right? You know, Mathmech and Branded and stuff like that. This was the other team I wanted to talk about. They were very close to beating out who was it? Snipe Hunter, the reigning world champions. And a lot of that was due to the fact that their final match was a 9-0, which was crazy. But on top of that, I think they had some really solid deck choices that were very interesting. First of all, Gamma. Gamma as their shared card worked really well. Gamma was really strong. And yeah, it's a really good hand trap into the current metagame. But on top of that, notably, this is the only team, I think, that didn't play Fire King. They instead played Rescue Ace. And the reason that you play Rescue Ace as opposed to Fire King, or the reason you play Fire King as opposed to Rescue Ace, is because you can't really play Diabell Star in Rescue Ace and in Fire King. And Fire King is just slightly better, so you're going to play the Snake Eye Fire King variant. However, because of that lapse in judgment from a lot of the other players, or more so the players preparing for Fire King Snake Eye and not necessarily preparing for Rescue Ace did really well. It was just a solid deck, right? And honestly, this list is genuinely one you could probably just take straight up into Master Duel and do really well with. Maybe add like Called By, but of course that kind of muddies the list, right? But overall, very solid list, and I really enjoyed it. Which is surprising, because I'm not that big of a fan of Rescue Ace. Then we have Master Duel Grinder, aka DB Grinder. Shout out to him. He did incredible with just Pearly. He dominated with Pearly. And yeah, this list was really good. I know there's Rivalry in here. I don't know if I ever saw it. But for the most part, solid list. Really dominant. Again, Pearly, underrepresented. And then we have Enzo with Voices, Voice, and Lab. Just solid across the board. And these guys were really creative with their lists. The Gamma coming up in pretty much all of their lists. If I'm not mistaken, I am mistaken. It wasn't in the Pearly list, but they were always strong when it ended up, when it was in their lists. So there's that. And that's pretty much it. I'll continue to scroll down. There's not really much of a note here. Super Heavy Samurai is kind of funny, but again, not much to note. There was a lot more Branded in a lot of the Eastern teams, right? Whereas a lot of the Western teams specifically wanted to play more of like Ubel and stuff like that, and you can kind of see that. Also, a lot of random stun decks that I said stun would probably do fairly well. Honestly, it didn't. It was pretty bad. I never saw it do anything, and I think a lot of the reasoning for that was because so many people were prepared to actually play out those games, and I think in Master Duel right now, people aren't, right? In the latter, people will just see you normal summon Pachycephalo and then just scoop, because it's like, oh, why even play out that game? It's not going to be fun, right? Whereas in, of course, Worlds, people are going to have to play out that game, and it ended up mattering a lot, right? Because honestly, stun doesn't really do a whole lot. So there's that. But all in all, there's the lists. I thought it was a great event, and all of those lists were not all of them, but like a lot of them were pretty interesting. So that was pretty fun. And yeah, let's hop into the TCG and discuss that. Alright, and here we are with this pie chart, which is oof. Now, if you don't know, the ban list for the TCG Worlds is a combined list from both the TCG and the OCG. So it takes the strongest hits from both lists, slaps them together, and that's the ban list we get. So Snake Eyes was hit on this ban list, even though the most recent ban list was the most recent TCG ban list wasn't taken into effect for this tournament. So the Fiendsmith stuff was in almost every list because that was more or less fully untouched. And it was dominant. It was dominant. It was a tier 0 event. All of these lists and all of these, well, I should say 1, 2, and 3, were all playing Fiendsmith. There were, I think, a grand total of 5 decks in the top 32, or the top 28, I guess, that were not, in fact, playing Fiendsmith. So it was kind of nasty. And of course, Fiendsmith took it, right? So there's that. But Yubel did end up taking the event technically, right? The Yubel deck did end up taking it overall. And yeah, you can see the breakdown here. Lots of Snake Eyes, right? I know this says Fire King. It's just Snake Eye. I mean, it's technically Fire King, right? But it is like a very minimal amount of Fire King because Fire King Kieran is limited to 2 in the OCG because I don't know reasons. But yeah, overall, this is the list. It's basically just Snake Eye. So there's that. We had in top 8 we had 2 non-Fiendsmith users. That was it. It was very funny. And it was Ritual Beast and Tenpai, who ended up playing each other in the first round, or in the top 8 first round of elimination, of single elimination. So that was funny. Or am I wrong? No, I'm wrong. They didn't play in the first round of single elimination. They played in Swiss. But ultimately, we had 1 Ritual Beast player and 1 Tenpai player. And yeah, honestly, America dominated. Or more specifically, North America dominated, right? We had a TCG finals, and then we had the North American team with 2 Canadians and 1 American in the ticket in Master Duel. So America kind of did pretty well. But overall, North America really, really dominated and showed how good it is, and that, as MBT put it, it may not have been a fluke last year. So there's that. But you can see, again, lots of Snake Eye, lots of Yubel, all Fiendsmith. It was every deck. There were a few, as you see here, a few lists that specifically did not use Fiendsmith, but even the Labyrinth list used Fiendsmith, which, honestly, this deck was kind of funny. It wasn't very good, but it was kind of funny. So there's that. But yeah, all in all, there you go. There's not really too much to talk about, right? Ruben played pretty well in the finals, but it was this story of this event in particular was the story of Snake Eye, or more specifically, sorry, Fiendsmith, and how I cannot wait for Beatrice and Apollosa and Lacrima to be banned so that we don't get Lacrima burn in Game 3 for game. That happened more than once, which means it happened too many times. So yeah, all in all, kind of silly, kind of a silly event. I don't really have much more to talk about. Like, I watched the whole thing, every round in the series, but there was not much that was interesting. It was all the same combos over and over and over again. We saw a ton of Yubel combo, we saw a ton of Snake Eye combo, and when we did see a non-Fiendsmith deck, it was Ritual Beast and Tenpai just Nibiru into OTK and Nibiru into OTK, and it wasn't very interesting. I wish it was a more dynamic TCG finals, but it just kind of wasn't, which makes me sad. You know? Or I should say TCG Worlds, right? It wasn't even just the finals, it was just across the board. It just wasn't all that interesting. Now, granted, compared to last year, which was a wild event, due to no one knowing what was actually going to be the best deck, and Dragon Link eventually taking it, it's hard to really compare, right? We knew, going into this, what was going to be the best, and it showed up. Yeah. Now, here's the thing. I would have said, going into this event, Snake Eye is maybe better, but I wouldn't have been able to say it was the best deck in the room. And I think even now, after the fact, you can kind of clearly be like, yeah, Yubel had a, could have been the best deck. And to me, in my mind now, I do think Yubel was just the better choice. However, Snake Eye was probably more comfortable for a lot of people and stuff like that, so there's that. But Yubel was not hit at all. Playing the Yubel Fiendsmith list was entirely untouched, as opposed to the Snake Eye list, which had a lot of hits. Most notably, the Snake Eye Ash being limited to 1 mattered quite significantly, but also, on top of that, you only had 1 of the Wanted. Wanted was also limited to 1, so that means that a lot of that consistency you would normally see in a Snake Eye list, which means you can play like more hand traps, right, and not brick as much. A lot of that was gone, so there's that. So yeah, Yubel, really, really well done, and shout out to Mark and Ruben. Mark honestly dominated as well. He was undefeated up until that point, and Ruben just, locked in and clutched it up. And also, Banned Nightmare Pain. I hate that. I hate that card. That's just a personal preference. I don't like it. Get it out of there. No one likes it. That's not true. No one. It's not no one. It's just me. I just don't like it. Get it out of there. And that's pretty much it for Worlds. Again, all of it was pretty, well, okay, not all of it. A lot of it had its issues, but a lot of it also was very fun. And yeah, I'm super excited for next year's Worlds, and with Jesse Cotton and co. already immediately making it in for finals, or not for finals, for Worlds next year, already locked in. It is going to be exciting to see if we can get that three-peat World Finals for Master Duel. Obviously, I think it'd be more interesting if we didn't get that and we got 2 other teams, or maybe just 1 other team. I still want the title holder to actually, compete in the finals for their title. I think that's more interesting. But it would be nice to see Heroes Future bring it back again, or the Korean team Sayer bring it back again as well, and potentially take it to the reigning champions. But we'll have to see next year. Who knows? Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you guys did indeed enjoy. If you did, that like this very much, so appreciate it. And remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye. Shout out to the Frost Guard, my members. Thank you guys so much for the support, and I hope you enjoy the content.